For 7 terrifying years, a billionaire could not sleep for even one peaceful night. Doctors failed, medicine failed. Nothing worked until a strange maid arrived at his mansion during a stormy night. But the moment she entered his home, buried secrets from his past began waking up, and something horrifying started waiting inside his dreams. Welcome to Dark Lantern Story. Before we enter tonight's mystery, tell us your city, your country, and the exact time you are watching from in the comments. And if you love dark suspense stories that keep you awake at night, subscribe to Dark Lantern Story and like this video so you never miss another unforgettable tale. Tonight's story is about a billionaire who owned almost everything in the world, except one thing most people take for granted every single night: sleep. For 7 long years, this man never truly slept. Doctors failed him. Medicine failed him. Money failed him. But one rainy night, everything changed after he employed a strange maid who arrived at his mansion carrying secrets darker than death itself. His name was Victor Hale. In the year 1898, Victor Hale was one of the richest men alive. His factories stood across England like giant monsters, breathing smoke into the sky. His ships crossed oceans every day carrying iron, coal, and steel. Newspapers called him the Iron King because nobody in business could defeat him. Politicians feared him. Workers hated him. Investors worshipped him. But behind the expensive suits, behind the giant mansion, behind the gold and power, Victor Hale was slowly losing his mind. Every single night became torture. He could not sleep. Not for 1 hour. Not for one peaceful moment. At first, doctors believed it was stress from business. Then they believed it was anxiety. Then they believed it was a rare sickness inside the brain. Victor traveled across Europe searching for help. He visited doctors in London, Paris, and Vienna. Some gave him sleeping powders. Some used strange machines. Some forced him into silent, dark rooms for days. Nothing worked. Victor always remained awake. His eyes became darker every month. His face grew pale like candle wax. Sometimes he stayed awake for 4 straight days until his hands shook violently during meetings. Servants inside his mansion became terrified of him. Small mistakes made him explode with anger. One maid accidentally spilled tea on the floor, and Victor fired her immediately while screaming like a madman. Another servant dropped a plate during dinner, and Victor smashed every dish in the dining room. His wife Eleanor slowly stopped speaking during meals. His young son became afraid whenever Victor entered a room. The mansion itself felt cursed. Every night Victor walked through the endless halls, unable to rest, while shadows stretched across the walls around him. Clocks ticked loudly like hammers inside his skull. The wind outside sounded like whispers. Sometimes he heard footsteps behind him, even when nobody was there. Sometimes he heard breathing near his bed while lying completely alone in darkness. Sleep became something he no longer understood. Something distant and impossible. One cold October evening, heavy rain attacked the giant windows of Hale Mansion while thunder rolled across the sky. Victor sat alone inside his library, holding a glass of whiskey in one trembling hand. The fire burned low inside the fireplace, but the room still felt freezing cold. Papers covered the desk before him, but he had not read a single word for nearly an hour. His eyes burned painfully from exhaustion. Suddenly, the library door opened quietly, and his old butler, Gregory, stepped inside carrying tea. Gregory had served the Hale family since Victor was a small child. His hair was now completely white, and his hands shook slightly from age. He placed the tea down carefully before speaking in a nervous voice. "Sir, there is a young woman outside asking for work." Victor barely looked up. "Tell her to leave." Gregory hesitated. "She says she can help you sleep." Silence filled the room immediately. Victor slowly lifted his eyes toward Gregory. Thunder shook the windows behind them. For years, many people had promised to cure his sleeplessness. All failed. Some were liars. Some were greedy fools searching for money. Victor hated every one of them. He drank from his whiskey glass slowly. "What is her name?" Gregory swallowed hard. "Clara Bell, sir." Victor stared into the fire quietly for several seconds. Then he whispered, "Bring her in." Minutes later, the doors opened again. A young woman stepped into the library, wearing a dark, wet dress covered with rainwater. Her black hair rested against her face in soft curls. She looked poor, very poor. Her shoes were old and muddy, yet something about her felt strange immediately. She did not look nervous. Most people feared Victor Hale the moment they met him. Clara Bell simply stood calmly inside the room, staring directly into his eyes without shaking. Gregory quietly left the library and closed the door behind her. Victor studied the young woman carefully. "How old are you?" Clara answered softly, 24. Victor poured more whiskey into his glass. "And you believe you can cure something the best doctors in Europe could not cure?" Clara looked toward the fireplace before answering. "Doctors cannot cure what they do not understand." Victor almost laughed. "You speak boldly for a maid." Clara met his eyes again. "You have not slept because your mind is afraid of silence." Victor frowned immediately. "What nonsense is that?" Clara remained calm. "Every night when the world becomes quiet, your memories grow louder." Victor's fingers tightened around the whiskey glass. For one strange moment he felt exposed, almost naked before her words. He quickly buried the feeling beneath anger. "You know nothing about me." Clara tilted her head slightly. "I know you are tired of pretending you are not afraid." Victor suddenly stood up. The movement was so sudden the whiskey glass nearly slipped from his hand. "Nobody speaks to me like that." Clara did not move. "Yet you still asked me to stay." Victor realized she was right. Part of him already believed this strange woman somehow understood him. He hated that feeling immediately. He walked closer until only inches separated them. "If you fail like every other person before you, you will leave this mansion before sunrise." Clara nodded once. "If I fail, I will leave willingly." Victor stared into her dark eyes. Something about them disturbed him deeply. They looked old somehow, older than her face, like eyes that carried too many secrets. Finally, Victor turned away. "Gregory will show you your room." Clara began walking toward the door, but stopped suddenly before leaving. "Sleep is not your real problem, Mr. Hale." Victor looked back sharply. Clara's voice became softer. "The real problem is what waits for you inside your dreams." Then she left. Victor remained motionless inside the library long after the door closed. Rain continued hammering the windows, while thunder echoed through the mansion. For the first time in many months, someone had spoken to him without fear, and somehow that frightened him more than anything else. The following morning, the servants whispered constantly about Clara Bell. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody knew who recommended her. She simply arrived at the mansion during a storm, asking for work. Gregory himself felt uneasy around her. During breakfast, he noticed strange things. Clara barely ate. She moved silently through rooms without making noise, and somehow she always seemed to appear before anyone called for her. Victor spent most of the day watching her, secretly. She cleaned bookshelves in the library, organized documents, and prepared tea with calm precision. Yet Victor noticed she never looked surprised whenever he entered a room suddenly, almost like she always knew where he was. That evening, Victor finally confronted her again inside the dining hall after the servants left. "Why did you really come here?" Clara calmly folded a napkin on the table. "To help you." Victor narrowed his eyes. Why would a stranger care whether I sleep or not? Clara looked at him quietly for several seconds before answering. Because some people should not suffer forever. Victor laughed bitterly. You speak as though you know suffering personally. Clara's face darkened slightly. I do. Silence filled the giant dining hall. Outside, rain began falling again. Victor suddenly felt uncomfortable beneath her gaze. He changed the subject quickly. Gregory says you arrived with no luggage. Clara nodded. I did not need much. Victor frowned. No family. No home. Clara answered softly. Not anymore. That night, Victor prepared for another endless battle against sleeplessness. He sat inside his bedroom reading business reports while a storm raged outside. Around midnight, he heard a soft knock. Clara entered carrying a single candle. Victor immediately looked irritated. I did not ask for you. Clara placed the candle beside the fireplace. I know. Without asking permission, she walked across the room, pulling thick curtains over the windows until moonlight disappeared completely. Then she approached the giant grandfather clock near the bed and stopped the swinging pendulum. Tick, tick, tick. Silence. Victor suddenly realized how much he hated that sound. Clara lowered the flames inside the fireplace until only soft light remained in the room. Then she turned toward him calmly. Lie down. Victor stared at her in disbelief. You truly believe this childish performance will cure me? Clara ignored the insult. Lie down, Mr. Hale. Victor slowly obeyed, mostly because exhaustion had weakened his desire to argue. Clara sat quietly beside the fireplace and began humming a soft melody Victor did not recognize. The sound drifted gently through the dark room like warm smoke. Victor closed his eyes for a moment. Then another moment passed. Then another. Something strange happened. For the first time in years, his mind became quiet. No racing thoughts, no screaming memories, no endless fear. Only silence and the sound of Clara's voice. Victor's breathing slowly changed. His body felt heavier. Sleep approached him softly, like something alive. Panic suddenly exploded inside him. Victor sat upright violently. Clara stopped humming immediately. Victor breathed hard while staring around the room. What are you doing to me? Clara answered calmly. Nothing. I am only helping you stop running. Victor felt anger returning fast. I do not run from anything. Clara looked directly into his eyes. Then why are you afraid to sleep? Victor opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Because deep inside, he knew the answer. He was afraid of dreams, afraid of memories, afraid of whatever darkness waited for him after closing his eyes. Clara stood slowly and moved toward the door. Before leaving, she whispered one final sentence. Your sleeplessness began long before the first sleepless night. Then she disappeared into the hallway. Victor remained awake until sunrise, thinking about those words. The next evening, something impossible happened. Victor fell asleep for almost 30 minutes while sitting inside the library chair. Gregory found him there and nearly dropped the tea tray from shock. It was the first natural sleep Victor experienced in 7 years, but Victor did not feel relief after waking. He felt terror, because during those 30 minutes, he dreamed about a long, dark hallway inside an old house. At the end of the hallway stood a small wooden door. Nothing else, just the door. And somehow Victor knew something terrible waited behind it. Victor Hale could not stop thinking about the dream, the hallway, the darkness, the small wooden door waiting at the end like something alive. The image followed him everywhere the next morning. During breakfast, he barely touched his food. During meetings, he forgot what people were saying. Even the sound of factory machines inside reports reminded him of the strange silence inside the dream. For the first time in years, Victor had actually slept, but instead of relief, he felt something worse. Fear. Real fear. Not the fear of sleepless nights, not the fear of losing money or power. This fear felt older, deeper, like something buried long ago slowly waking up inside him. Rain clouds covered the sky outside Hale Mansion while servants moved quietly through the halls. Everyone noticed Victor looked different, less angry, less violent, but more disturbed. Gregory entered the study carrying fresh tea and hesitated before speaking. "Sir, you slept again this afternoon." Victor slowly looked up from the fireplace. "How long?" Gregory swallowed carefully. "Nearly 1 full hour." Victor stared into the fire without answering. Gregory had served the Hale family for decades and had never seen anything like this. For 7 years, Victor could barely close his eyes for minutes. Now sleep was suddenly returning after the arrival of Clara Bell. Yet instead of becoming calmer, Victor seemed more haunted each day. Gregory finally asked the question worrying everyone inside the mansion. "Sir, who exactly is that young woman?" Victor answered quietly. "I wish I knew." Later that evening, Victor found Clara arranging books inside the library. She moved slowly across the shelves while candlelight danced softly around the room. Victor watched her silently for several moments before speaking. "I dreamed again." Clara continued placing books back carefully. "Tell me." Victor stepped closer. Same hallway, same door. But this time I heard something. Clara stopped moving. "What did you hear?" Victor's voice lowered. "A woman crying." Clara slowly turned toward him. "Did you recognize the voice?" Victor shook his head immediately, but inside he felt uncertain. Something about the crying sounded familiar. Painfully familiar. Clara studied him carefully. "Your mind is beginning to remember." Victor frowned. "Remember what?" Clara looked toward the dark window. "Things you buried because they were too painful to carry." Victor suddenly felt anger rising again. "Stop speaking like you know my life." Clara met his eyes calmly. "I know your suffering began during childhood." Victor's expression hardened instantly. "You know nothing about my childhood." Clara spoke softly. "Your father frightened you." Silence filled the room immediately. Victor's chest tightened painfully. Nobody spoke about Richard Hale inside the mansion. Nobody dared. Even after his death, his shadow remained over everything. Victor slowly walked closer toward Clara. "Who told you that?" Clara answered quietly. "Nobody needed to tell me." Victor grabbed her arm suddenly. "Tell me the truth. Who are you?" Clara looked completely calm despite his anger. "Someone connected to your past." Victor released her immediately and stepped back, breathing hard. Every instinct inside him screamed that something was terribly wrong about this woman, yet another part of him desperately wanted answers only she seemed capable of giving. That night, Victor refused to sleep. He remained inside the library, drinking whiskey, while storm winds shook the mansion outside. Midnight arrived, then 1 in the morning, then 2. Finally, exhaustion defeated him. Victor's eyes closed slowly inside the chair near the fireplace. The dream returned immediately. The hallway looked clearer this time. Old paintings covered the walls. Torn wallpaper hung from the ceiling. Thunder echoed somewhere far away. Victor walked slowly toward the small wooden door at the end. Each step felt heavier, colder. Suddenly the crying voice returned, soft, weak, terrified. Victor stopped breathing. He recognized it now. His mother, Margaret Hale. Victor rushed forward desperately. "Mother." The crying stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the hallway. Victor reached for the door handle with trembling fingers. Then another sound echoed behind the door. A man laughing softly. cold, cruel, familiar. Victor's blood turned to ice. His father, Richard Hale. Suddenly, the door began shaking violently as if someone trapped inside was trying to escape. Victor stumbled backward in terror. Then a loud voice screamed from behind the door, "Victor, wake up before he finds you." Victor opened his eyes with a violent gasp. The library fire had almost died completely. His entire body shook with sweat, and standing beside him in darkness was Clara Bell. Victor jumped to his feet instantly. "What are you doing here?" Clara's face looked pale beneath the candlelight. "You were screaming in your sleep." Victor rubbed his face, desperately trying to steady his breathing. It felt too real. Clara remained silent. Victor looked at her sharply. The voice belonged to my mother. Clara nodded slowly. "Yes." Victor stared at her in shock. "How do you know that?" Clara whispered softly, "Because she used to say those exact words often." Victor felt cold fear spreading through his chest. He moved toward Clara carefully, like a man approaching danger. "What exactly are you hiding from me?" Clara looked deeply into his eyes before answering. "Your mother knew terrible things about your father." Victor's face hardened immediately. "My father is dead." Clara nodded once. Some evil survives death. Victor suddenly lost his patience. "Enough. Every answer from you sounds like another riddle." Clara stepped closer. "Then ask the right question." Victor stared at her silently for several seconds. Then he finally whispered, "Did you know my mother?" Clara's expression changed slightly. Sadness touched her eyes for the first time. "Yes." Victor felt his heartbeat quicken. "How?" Clara looked away toward the dying fire. "Long ago, I worked for your family." Victor froze completely. Memories flashed suddenly through his mind. A rainy afternoon. His mother speaking quietly with a young maid in the garden. Dark curly hair, calm eyes. Victor's breathing became uneven. "No." Clara nodded softly. "You remember me now." Victor stepped backward slowly. "Impossible." "That maid disappeared when I was a child." Clara remained silent. Victor whispered weakly, "My mother said she ran away." Clara's eyes darkened. "That is what your father wanted everyone to believe." Thunder exploded outside, shaking the windows violently. Victor suddenly remembered another forgotten detail from childhood. The servants feared Richard Hale deeply. Some disappeared without warning. Nobody ever questioned it. Fear controlled the entire estate. Victor looked toward Clara again. "What really happened to you?" Clara stared into the flames, quietly. "Your father discovered something he should never have discovered." Victor's voice trembled slightly. "What thing?" Clara answered softly. "Your mother planned to escape from him." Silence filled the library. Victor felt the room spinning around him. He remembered arguments late at night, his mother crying behind locked doors, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. As a child, he never fully understood. Clara continued speaking quietly. "Margaret Hale wanted to take you far away from that house. She believed your father's darkness would destroy you one day." Victor stared at the floor. "She never told me any of this." Clara looked at him sadly. "She was trying to protect you." Victor suddenly remembered the night his mother died. Officially, she passed from illness during winter, yet strange details from that night still haunted him. The shouting, the broken glass, blood on the staircase. Victor's breathing grew heavier. Clara watched him carefully. "You remember more than you realize." Victor shook his head violently. "Stop doing that. Stop acting like you lived through my memories." Clara whispered softly, "Because I did." Victor looked up sharply. Before he could speak, a loud crash echoed somewhere upstairs. Both turned immediately toward the ceiling. Another crash followed. Heavy, violent. Gregory suddenly burst into the library, pale with terror. Sir, someone is inside the west wing. Victor grabbed a candle quickly, while Gregory armed himself with a fireplace poker. The three hurried upstairs through dark, silent halls, while thunder roared outside. The west wing had remained mostly abandoned for years after Eleanor moved into another section of the mansion with their son. Dust covered the floors. White cloths covered furniture like ghosts standing in darkness. Another loud crash echoed ahead. Gregory whispered nervously, "Dear God." Victor pushed open the final hallway door violently. The room beyond froze, all three of them in shock. A giant family portrait had fallen from the wall, smashing against the floor. Glass covered everything. Victor slowly approached the ruined painting, holding the candle higher. The portrait showed the Hale family standing outside their old London estate decades earlier. Richard Hale stood proudly beside Margaret. Young Victor stood between them, wearing a black suit. But Victor's blood turned cold when he noticed another figure standing beside his mother, a young maid with dark curly hair. Clara Bell. Gregory gasped softly behind him. Victor stared at the painting in horror. This portrait was painted nearly 30 years ago. Slowly he turned toward Clara. She looked exactly the same. Not older, not different. Exactly the same woman from the portrait. Victor whispered weakly, "That is impossible." Clara remained silent. Gregory backed away, making the sign of the cross nervously. Victor's eyes moved toward the corner of the portrait where the date remained visible beneath cracked paint. 1871. Victor looked back at Clara with growing terror. "You have not aged a single day." Clara finally spoke. "Some wounds do not age." Victor stepped backward slowly. "Who are you?" Clara looked at him quietly. "Someone your mother trusted." Victor shouted louder this time. "No more riddles. Tell me the truth." Suddenly, every candle inside the room flickered violently. Wind burst through the hallway, though no windows were open. Gregory cried out in fear. Clara's voice became softer. "The truth is waiting where your fear began." Victor's heart pounded painfully. "What does that mean?" Clara slowly pointed toward the far end of the hallway. Hidden behind old furniture stood a narrow wooden staircase Victor barely recognized. Childhood memories crashed into him immediately. That staircase led toward a part of the mansion sealed decades ago after his father's death. Victor had not walked there since he was 10 years old. Clara whispered, "Behind that door lies the reason you cannot sleep." Victor stared toward the darkness at the top of the staircase. Suddenly he remembered something else. A small hidden room, a locked wooden door. The memory arrived like broken glass, slicing through his mind. Victor grabbed the railing tightly as dizziness overwhelmed him. Gregory whispered nervously, "Sir, perhaps we should leave this place tonight." But Victor barely heard him. His eyes remained fixed on the darkness above. Clara stepped beside him, softly. "Your mind buried the truth to protect you. But buried truth never dies." Victor slowly looked toward her. Fear filled every part of him now. Not fear of ghosts, not fear of sleepless nights. Fear of remembering. Thunder exploded across the sky again while the staircase disappeared deeper into darkness above them. Then Victor noticed something lying near the broken portrait frame on the floor, a small silver necklace covered in dust. His breathing stopped completely. He recognized it instantly. The necklace belonged to his mother. Margaret Hale was buried wearing it nearly 30 years earlier. Victor Hale stared at the silver necklace in complete horror. The candlelight shook violently in his trembling hand, while rain hammered the windows around them. Gregory looked terrified beside him, but Victor barely noticed. His entire mind focused on the necklace resting among the broken glass on the floor. He remembered the exact moment it disappeared forever. The funeral. The black coffin. His mother lying motionless beneath white flowers, while tears rolled down his small, frightened face. Victor himself had watched the necklace resting around Margaret Hale's neck before the coffin closed forever. Yet now it lay here, inside the abandoned west wing of Hale Mansion, nearly 30 years later. Victor slowly bent down and picked it up with shaking fingers. Cold. The necklace felt ice cold. Almost frozen. Gregory whispered nervously, "Sir, perhaps we should call the police." Victor ignored him completely. His eyes slowly lifted toward Clara Bell. She stood motionless near the staircase, watching him quietly. Victor's voice trembled. "How did this get here?" Clara answered softly, "Some things buried long ago are beginning to return." Victor's fear suddenly exploded into anger. "Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me the truth right now." Clara remained calm. "The truth frightens you more than sleepless nights ever did." Victor moved toward her aggressively. "Who are you?" Clara's eyes filled with sadness. "Someone your mother trusted with her life." Gregory interrupted nervously. "Sir, this woman is dangerous. We must leave this place immediately." Victor barely heard him. He could not stop staring at Clara. The storm outside seemed louder now. Darker, like the entire mansion itself was listening. Suddenly, Victor remembered something else from childhood. A hidden room beyond the staircase, a small, locked door. His breathing became uneven. Clara noticed immediately. "You remember it now," Victor whispered weakly. "The room." Clara nodded slowly. "Your father never wanted you entering that room again." Gregory looked confused. "What room?" Victor slowly turned toward the dark staircase leading upward. "I have not been there since I was 10 years old." Clara stepped closer. "That is where your nightmares were born." Silence filled the hallway. Victor felt cold sweat sliding down his neck. Every instinct inside him screamed to walk away. Leave the mansion. Forget everything. But another feeling had become stronger now. Curiosity. Terrible, dangerous curiosity. Clara pointed toward the staircase softly. "You must see it." Gregory grabbed Victor's arm immediately. "Sir, please listen to me. This entire situation is wrong. That woman appeared from nowhere. She knows things she should not know. Now your dead mother's necklace suddenly appears inside an abandoned wing. Something evil is happening here." Victor slowly looked toward Gregory. For the first time in years, he saw genuine fear in the old butler's eyes. Gregory had survived wars, financial collapse, and decades serving the cruel Hale family. Yet tonight he looked completely terrified. Victor whispered quietly, "Maybe evil has always been here." Before Gregory could answer, thunder exploded so loudly the entire mansion shook. One of the hallway candles suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed half the corridor instantly. Clara began walking slowly toward the staircase. Victor watched her carefully. She moved almost silently across the floor, too silently, like someone gliding through a dream. Gregory whispered shakily, "Dear God, protect us." Victor followed Clara upward, while Gregory reluctantly came behind, carrying another candle. The staircase creaked beneath their feet as they climbed higher into darkness. Dust covered everything. Thick spider webs stretched across corners untouched for decades. Victor's heart pounded painfully with every step because memories kept returning stronger now. A child crying softly, his mother whispering urgently, heavy footsteps outside a locked door. They reached the top floor. A narrow hallway stretched ahead covered in darkness. At the very end stood a small wooden door. Victor froze instantly. The same door from his dreams. Same shape, same color, same terrible feeling. Gregory whispered, "What is this place?" Victor barely breathed. I dreamed about this door. Clara looked toward him calmly. Because your mind never truly escaped it. Victor slowly approached the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. The silver necklace remained clenched tightly inside his hand. Suddenly another memory flashed violently inside his mind. He was 10 years old again, standing before this same door while his mother cried downstairs. Victor stumbled slightly from dizziness. Gregory steadied him quickly. "Sir." Victor pushed him away gently. "I am fine." But he was not fine. Fear spread through every part of his body now. Clara stood beside the door quietly. "Your father built this room himself." Victor stared at her. "Why?" Clara's face darkened. "To hide things." Silence swallowed the hallway. Victor reached toward the doorknob slowly. His hand shook badly. Before touching it, he whispered, "What is inside?" Clara answered softly, "The reason you cannot sleep." Victor finally turned the knob. The door creaked open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. Gregory lifted the candle higher while all three stepped carefully inside. Dust filled the air immediately. The hidden room looked frozen in time. Old furniture covered by cloth stood against the walls. Shelves filled with books leaned crookedly beneath years of neglect. A broken rocking horse rested near the fireplace. Victor stared at it in shock. That horse belonged to him. His breathing grew faster. He remembered playing here as a child. He remembered hiding here during storms because his father terrified him. Clara walked deeper into the room quietly. "Your mother often brought you here when Richard became violent." Victor slowly turned toward her. "How do you know that?" Clara looked at him sadly. "Because I was there." Gregory whispered nervously behind them, "Sir, we should leave now. This place feels cursed." But Victor could not move. The room itself felt alive with memories. Suddenly he noticed scratches across the wooden floor near the far wall. Deep, violent scratches. Like heavy furniture had been dragged repeatedly across the room. Victor walked closer carefully. Then he saw it. Dried, dark stains beneath the dust. His blood turned cold instantly. Blood, very old blood. Gregory stepped backward in horror. Dear God! Victor stared silently at the stains, while another memory forced itself into his mind. Screaming. His mother screaming downstairs. A loud crash. Then silence. Victor grabbed his head painfully. Clara moved toward him softly. "Your mind buried the memory because you were only a child." Victor whispered weakly, "I do not want to remember." Clara's voice became gentler. "But you must." Suddenly a loud bang echoed somewhere beneath the floorboards. Gregory nearly dropped the candle. Victor looked around sharply. Another bang followed. Slow. Heavy. Like someone hitting wood from below. Gregory's face turned completely pale. "Something is under us." Silence returned briefly. Then came another sound. Footsteps. Slow footsteps moving directly beneath the room. Victor's heartbeat exploded inside his chest. Clara remained strangely calm. She walked toward the far wall, where an enormous bookshelf stood covered in dust. Without speaking, she touched the side carefully. A loud click echoed. The bookshelf slowly moved sideways, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness below the mansion. Cold air rushed upward immediately, carrying the smell of mold and wet earth. Gregory whispered shakily, "No, no, no, no." Victor stared at the hidden passage, completely frozen. Childhood memories suddenly flooded back stronger than ever. His father dragging something heavy downstairs during the night. His mother crying desperately. A woman screaming. Victor stumbled backward, breathing hard. Clara looked at him quietly. This is where the truth sleeps. Gregory grabbed Victor's arm desperately. "Sir, we cannot go down there." Victor slowly looked toward the darkness beneath the staircase. Every instinct screamed danger. Yet he also understood something terrifying. His sleeplessness would never end, until he discovered the truth waiting below. Victor swallowed hard. "We are going down." Gregory looked horrified. "Sir, please." Victor grabbed a lantern from the shelf nearby and lit it carefully. His hand still trembled badly. Clara stepped toward the staircase first. Victor followed slowly while Gregory muttered prayers behind them. The hidden stairs descended deep beneath the mansion. The air grew colder with every step. Water dripped somewhere inside darkness ahead. Victor's lantern revealed stone walls covered in black mold. Finally, the staircase ended inside a narrow underground corridor. Gregory nearly gagged from the smell. Rot, dampness, death. Clara continued walking silently ahead. Victor followed carefully while his heartbeat thundered louder than the storm outside. The corridor finally opened into a large underground chamber. Victor lifted the lantern higher and immediately felt his blood freeze. Chains hung from the walls. Rusted shackles rested on the floor. Old wooden crates stood broken near the corners. This was not a storage room. It was a prison. Gregory whispered in horror, "What kind of place is this?" Victor already knew the answer deep inside. Richard Hale built this place. Clara slowly turned toward him. "Your father hid many terrible things beneath this mansion." Victor's breathing became uneven. Suddenly the lantern light revealed something else near the far wall. A human skeleton chained upright against stone. Gregory screamed loudly and stumbled backward. Victor could not move. The skeleton still wore fragments of old clothing, and around its wrist rested a silver bracelet engraved with initials, CB. Victor stared at Clara in complete horror. Slowly he turned back toward the skeleton, then back toward Clara again. Same dark eyes, same face, same woman. Impossible terror crushed his chest. Victor whispered weakly, "No." Clara's voice remained calm, but sad. "Richard Hale discovered your mother planned to escape with you." Victor's knees weakened. Clara continued softly, "I helped her prepare everything." Victor's voice trembled violently. "What happened here?" Clara looked toward the skeleton chained against the wall. "Your father stopped us before we could leave." Silence swallowed the underground chamber. Victor felt the room spinning around him. He remembered more now. His mother terrified during dinner, his father drinking heavily, shouting during the night. Clara continued speaking quietly. "Margaret begged Richard to let you go, but your father believed fear created strength. He wanted you to become exactly like him." Victor shook his head slowly. "No." Clara nodded sadly. "Richard killed anyone who threatened his control." Victor stared toward the skeleton again while nausea twisted inside him. Gregory whispered prayers repeatedly near the staircase. Victor looked back toward Clara with tears forming in his eyes. "If you died here, then who are you?" Clara stepped closer, slowly. "Someone who made your mother a promise." Victor whispered, "What promise?" Clara's eyes softened. "That one day I would help her son sleep peacefully again." Tears finally rolled down Victor's face. He suddenly understood everything. The dreams, the fear, the sleepless nights. His mind spent years protecting him from memories too terrible for a child to survive. Clara's spirit had returned because the truth refused to stay buried forever. Suddenly another sound echoed through the underground chamber. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps approaching slowly from deeper within the darkness beyond the prison room. Gregory screamed again. Victor lifted the lantern shakily toward the black corridor ahead. Then a deep familiar voice echoed through the darkness. "Victor." The billionaire froze instantly. His face turned pale with terror because he recognized that voice immediately. Richard Hale. Victor Hale could not breathe. The voice echoing through the underground chamber belonged to only one man in the world. Richard Hale, his father. The dead billionaire slowly lifted the lantern higher while his hand shook violently. Gregory stood frozen near the staircase, whispering prayers beneath his breath. Clara remained calm beside the chained skeleton, her expression unreadable beneath the weak lantern light. The footsteps continued approaching from the darkness ahead, slow, heavy, deliberate. Victor's chest tightened painfully. Every terrible childhood memory returned at once. The shouting, the fear, the sound of broken glass, his mother crying during storms, Richard Hale's voice roaring through the mansion like thunder. Victor whispered weakly, "Impossible." Then the footsteps stopped. Silence swallowed the underground prison completely. Water dripped softly from the ceiling while the storm above rumbled through the earth around them. Gregory's breathing sounded loud and uneven. Victor stared into the darkness ahead, desperately trying to see who waited there. Then another sound came, a soft laugh, cold, cruel, familiar. Victor felt his blood turn to ice. Richard Hale always laughed that way before hurting someone. Clara slowly stepped closer to Victor. "Do not let fear control you now." Victor barely heard her. The darkness ahead suddenly shifted. A tall figure slowly emerged from the black corridor. The lantern light touched pale skin first, then sharp eyes, then a black coat covered in dust and shadows. Victor staggered backward immediately. Richard Hale stood before him exactly as he remembered from childhood. Tall, severe, powerful. His gray eyes looked cold as winter stone. Not a single trace of kindness existed in them. Gregory screamed loudly and collapsed against the staircase wall. Victor's voice trembled violently. "You are dead." Richard's expression remained emotionless. "Yet here you stand still terrified of me." Victor could not move. His father looked completely real. Every detail remained unchanged from decades earlier. The same silver watch hanging from his coat. The same deep scar near his jaw. The same terrifying eyes that haunted Victor's dreams since childhood. Richard slowly looked around the underground prison before speaking again. "You finally found the truth." Victor swallowed hard. "What are you?" Richard answered calmly, "A shadow you could never escape." Clara stepped forward immediately. "Leave him alone." Richard's eyes slowly moved toward her. Hatred darkened his face instantly. "Even death failed to silence you." Clara's voice remained steady. "You buried bodies. You buried lies. But truth always rises eventually." Richard laughed softly again. "Truth means nothing. Fear controls people far better." Victor suddenly remembered those exact words from childhood. Fear creates obedience. His father repeated it constantly while ruling workers, servants, and family through terror. Richard looked back toward Victor slowly. "You became successful because of me." Victor stared at him silently. Richard continued walking closer. "I made you strong. Without my lessons, you would have become weak like your mother." Rage slowly replaced fear inside Victor's chest. "Do not speak about her." Richard stopped only inches away now. "She poisoned your mind with softness. Compassion creates weakness." Victor's fists tightened. "You killed her." Silence filled the chamber instantly. Gregory looked horrified. Clara remained still. Richard simply stared into Victor's eyes without emotion. Then he answered quietly, "She betrayed me." Victor felt tears burning behind his eyes. "She was trying to save me from you." Richard's face darkened immediately. "Save you? I was building you into greatness. Look at your empire, your factories, your fortune. All because I taught you fear." Victor suddenly realized something terrifying. Part of his father's words were true. For years, Victor ruled workers exactly the same way Richard ruled his family. Anger, intimidation, fear. He had become the very thing he hated most. Richard noticed the realization spreading across Victor's face. You carry me inside you whether you admit it or not. Victor looked away painfully. Clara stepped beside him, softly. No. He still has a choice. Richard laughed bitterly. Choice. Humans always choose power over kindness, eventually. Victor slowly lifted his eyes toward his father again. Maybe I already did once. Richard smiled coldly. Exactly. Victor thought about the workers he mistreated, the servants he terrified, the family he emotionally abandoned while obsessing over power and sleeplessness. Shame crushed him heavily. Richard stepped even closer, lowering his voice. But you can still reclaim your strength. Forget the dead. Forget guilt. Become who you were meant to become. Victor stared silently into his father's cold eyes. For a brief, terrifying moment, part of him wanted to believe those words. Power felt easier than pain. Cruelty felt easier than regret. Richard sensed the weakness immediately. He smiled faintly. You see now. Fear works. Suddenly, Clara's voice cut through the darkness sharply. Victor, remember your mother. Victor closed his eyes instantly. Margaret Hale's face appeared inside his mind, gentle, loving, frightened. He remembered her protecting him during storms, holding him tightly while Richard screamed downstairs. He remembered the warmth missing from every other part of his childhood. Victor slowly opened his eyes again. No. Richard's smile faded slightly. Victor stepped backward from him firmly. You taught me fear, but she taught me humanity. Richard's expression twisted with anger. Humanity is weakness. Victor shook his head slowly. No, humanity is the reason I am not completely like you. Silence swallowed the chamber. Then suddenly the lantern flames exploded violently brighter. Wind rushed through the underground prison, though no exit stood open. Richard's face darkened with rage. Clara stepped forward beside Victor. He no longer belongs to your darkness. Richard shouted furiously. Silence. The entire chamber shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Gregory cried out in terror near the staircase. Victor stared at his father in horror. Richard's appearance began changing. His face looked older now, rotting. His skin turning pale gray beneath the lantern light. His eyes becoming black, empty pits filled with hatred. Victor stepped backward, breathing hard. Richard's voice deepened unnaturally. You think truth sets people free. Truth destroys them. Clara stood directly between Victor and Richard now. Your power ended long ago. Richard's rotten face twisted angrily. Yet he still fears me. Victor realized she was right. Deep inside, fear still controlled him. Even now, as a grown billionaire, one look from his father reduced him into the terrified little boy, hiding inside the secret room upstairs. Richard slowly pointed toward Victor. Look at yourself, sleepless, broken, weak. Everything inside you still belongs to me. Victor's breathing became uneven again. Fear returned instantly. Clara looked back at him urgently. Do not listen. Victor whispered shakily. I cannot stop hearing him. Richard smiled darkly. Because the truth frightens you. Victor's chest tightened painfully. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe he truly had become nothing more than another cruel Hale, shaped by fear. Suddenly Clara grabbed Victor's hand firmly. Listen to me carefully. Victor looked toward her. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Clara looked emotional, almost desperate. Your father ruled through fear because fear was all he understood. But your mother believed love could break that darkness. Victor stared at her silently. Clara squeezed his hand tighter. "Which legacy will you choose?" Richard roared angrily. "Enough!" The underground chamber shook again. Chains rattled violently against the walls. Water burst from cracked pipes overhead. Gregory screamed. The ceiling is collapsing. Dust filled the air while stones crashed around them. Richard's shadowy form grew larger inside the chaos. Victor realized something horrifying. The prison itself was reacting to the hatred trapped inside it for decades. Clara stepped toward Richard fearlessly. "You cannot keep him here anymore." Richard's voice echoed unnaturally through the chamber. "He belongs to me." Victor suddenly saw something inside the darkness beyond Richard's monstrous figure. Another person standing quietly behind him. A woman. Soft light surrounded her gently. Margaret Hale. Victor's heart nearly stopped. His mother smiled sadly toward him. Then she whispered softly, "Wake up, Victor." Suddenly everything became clear inside his mind. The sleeplessness, the nightmares, the fear. His entire life had been controlled by one thing. Trauma buried so deeply it poisoned every part of him. Richard fed upon that fear for years because Victor never confronted the truth. But now the truth stood before him completely exposed. Victor slowly straightened his posture. Richard noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" Victor wiped tears from his face. "Ending this." Richard's expression darkened. "You cannot escape me." Victor looked directly into his father's black, empty eyes. "Maybe not completely, but I do not belong to you anymore." Clara smiled faintly beside him. Richard screamed furiously and lunged forward through the darkness. At that exact moment, Victor shouted with every ounce of strength inside him, "You no longer control me." The lantern exploded in blinding light. Gregory covered his face, screaming. Wind roared through the underground prison like a hurricane. Richard's shadow twisted violently, while terrible sounds echoed through the chamber. Victor saw Clara standing between him and the darkness, glowing softly beneath the light. Then Richard's scream filled the prison one final time, before suddenly vanishing completely. Silence. Complete silence. The wind stopped. The chains became still. Darkness settled quietly around them once more. Gregory slowly lowered his hands, trembling violently. Victor looked around, breathing hard. Richard Hale was gone. Only empty darkness remained where his father once stood. Water dripped softly from the ceiling again. Clara looked exhausted somehow. Her face appeared paler now. Victor whispered softly, "Is it over?" Clara nodded once. "The fear no longer owns you." Victor suddenly felt something strange. Calmness. Real calmness. For the first time in years, the heavy pressure inside his chest had vanished completely. Tears rolled slowly down his face. Clara smiled gently. "Your mother would be proud of you." Victor looked toward the soft, glowing figure of Margaret still standing near the corridor. She smiled lovingly before slowly fading into darkness. Victor reached toward her desperately. "Mother." But she disappeared peacefully, like mist beneath sunlight. Clara touched Victor's shoulder softly. She waited a very long time for this night. Gregory finally found his voice again. "We need to leave this horrible place immediately." Victor nodded slowly, but before turning away, he walked toward Clara's chained skeleton resting against the wall. He stared sadly at the rusted bracelet around its wrist. "You stayed all these years because of a promise." Clara looked at him quietly. "Some promises matter more than death." Victor swallowed painfully. "I will give you a proper burial." Clara's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you." Suddenly, the underground chamber trembled again. Small cracks spread across the ceiling rapidly. Gregory shouted, "We must go now." Victor grabbed the lantern while Gregory hurried toward the staircase. Clara remained standing beside her skeleton calmly. Victor looked back at her urgently. "Come with us." Clara smiled sadly. "My place was always here until you remembered the truth." Victor froze. Clara stepped backward slowly into the shadows. "You can sleep now, Victor Hale." Before he could answer, the ceiling above collapsed violently. Stones crashed everywhere. Gregory pulled Victor toward the staircase while dust exploded through the chamber. Victor looked back one final time through the chaos. Clara stood smiling peacefully beside her remains as darkness swallowed the underground prison forever. Victor and Gregory barely escaped the underground prison before the hidden staircase collapsed behind them. Dust exploded through the secret room while the entire west wing trembled violently. Gregory fell to his knees, gasping for breath, but Victor remained standing, silently staring at the darkness where Clara disappeared forever. The storm outside slowly began fading. For the first time in many years, Hale Mansion felt strangely quiet, not empty, peaceful. Victor slowly looked down at his trembling hands. The fear was gone. The terrible weight crushing his chest for 7 long years had vanished completely. Gregory finally stood beside him, carefully. "Sir, what exactly happened down there?" Victor looked toward the broken hallway thoughtfully. The truth finally woke up. Neither man spoke again that night. Workers sealed the underground prison forever the next morning. Clara Bell's remains were carefully removed from the hidden chamber and given a proper burial beside Margaret Hale in a quiet cemetery outside London. Victor himself attended the funeral wearing black, while rain fell softly around the graves. Very few people understood why the powerful billionaire cried beside the grave of a maid nobody remembered. But Victor understood. Clara Bell gave her life protecting him long before he was old enough to understand sacrifice. Even death could not stop her from keeping the promise she made to his mother. That night, Victor returned to Hale Mansion exhausted. Gregory nervously asked if he wished to prepare sleeping medicine before bed. Victor simply smiled softly. No medicine tonight. He walked alone toward his bedroom while rain whispered gently outside the windows. For the first time in 7 years, Victor felt no fear entering darkness. No whispers haunted the halls. No footsteps followed him through the mansion. He slowly lay down beside the fireplace and closed his eyes. Minutes passed peacefully. Then sleep finally came. Deep, warm, natural sleep. No nightmares. No hallway. No wooden door. Only silence and peace. The next morning, sunlight filled Victor's bedroom while birds sang outside the windows. Gregory entered carefully, expecting another sleepless nightmare. Instead, he froze in complete shock. Victor Hale still slept peacefully beneath the blankets like a man reborn. Tears filled Gregory's eyes immediately because he realized something impossible had finally happened. The billionaire who could not sleep had finally found rest. Weeks later, Victor began changing his entire life. He treated workers with kindness. He repaired broken relationships with his family. He stopped ruling through fear like his father once did. The darkness inside him slowly disappeared because he finally understood one painful truth. Money cannot bury trauma forever. Power cannot silence guilt. And fear passed from one generation to another becomes a prison stronger than chains. But healing begins the moment someone chooses truth over fear. Years later, people still whispered strange stories about Hale Mansion during storms. Some servants claimed they heard soft piano music late at night drifting through empty halls. Others swore they once saw a young woman with dark curly hair smiling near the west wing windows before disappearing into darkness. But Victor never feared those stories, because deep inside, he knew Clara Bell was no monster. She was the reason he finally learned how to sleep again. Thank you for listening to tonight's story on Dark Lantern Story. If this mystery kept you entertained until the very end, subscribe now and like this video for more dark suspense, stories filled with secrets, twists, and unforgettable endings. And before you leave, tell us your city, your country, and the exact time you finished this story from. Until next time, stay curious, stay careful, and never ignore the doors your mind is too afraid to open.